TEMA Talk is a BS-free zone with smart, funny and educational conversations with entrepreneurs and business owners sharing their stories and insights designed to help you succeed. The result is a video vault of wisdom, strategies and tactics on how to grow your business by increasing revenue, reducing costs and amplifying your market share. Welcome to TEMA Talk, the B2B show created to help entrepreneurs and CEOs succeed. Here is your host, business growth architect and founder of TEMA, Carl M. Gibbons.
Welcome to another edition of TEMA Talk. I'm your host, Carl Gibbons, and today we're going to get all legal on you. Because our guest today is Steve Maggi, and he's a lawyer, former immigrant and naturalized US citizen, so that's something that we both have in common. He's been practicing immigration law in the US now for almost 2 decades. He's a Georgetown University Law Center graduate and former associate at the international law firm of Morgan, Lewis and Bockius. He's also now the founder of SMA Law Firm, which he currently manages to help individuals and companies worldwide with their vision and their dream to become a part of the American dream. Steve, welcome to TEMA Talk.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, Carl.
Okay, so let's get down to it, Steve. We live in a country that's vilified, it appears to me, by everybody that lives in it, but there's a whole line of people waiting at the door who want to get in, right? And that's always, I don't see the line going the other way. I don't see people with their bags wanting to leave. But there's lots of myth, rumor, and legend about how you actually get into the US. So I want to start and break all of that down and let's talk about that. So let's start off with anybody that's watching this, and we have viewers all over the world who are thinking, I would like to leave where I am now. I left the UK and I would like to live in the United States. What are the rules? What does it take? What do they need? How does it happen?
Wow, it's a very broad question, Carl. I think
and you've got 30 seconds and your time starts now.
The first rule of thumb is, what is your nationality, or what nationalities do you have? In other words, which passports do you possess? Which passports do your spouse, maybe does your spouse possess? Because there are different visas available to individuals depending on where they're from, what passports they have. That allows them to create, maybe be a little bit more innovative or creative, and to use different kinds of visas to enter the US, especially if they're entrepreneurs. If you have an entrepreneurial hat you can put on, and you're from one of 81 countries that have a treaty with the US, it's called the E2 treaty, for example, you have a good opportunity to set up a business like a lot of people in the UK do through the US Embassy in London. And so the first question is, what nationalities do you have? And I guess the second question is then, who do you work for overseas? Perhaps you work for a company that can transfer you if they set up a subsidiary. And then obviously the easiest route is still, do you have direct family members in the US that might be able to petition for you? If you don't fall into any of those categories, it's going to be a little bit more challenging.
Right. Now, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? We all know that. What for the entrepreneur, and let's use the UK as an example, because I personally have direct experience there, right? What kind of budget does somebody need to look at? It's a huge move, and we'll talk about that, the implications of that. And again, I've done it, and I had no idea. I thought I did, but I had no idea. But in terms of straight finance, what's it going to cost? What sort of numbers are we looking at?
Well, in practice, the law, in theory, the law doesn't give you a specific number. So let's say the E2 visa, which is the one we use for people who are investing in US businesses that they set up, which is great because it's a win-win for the economy. Those businesses they set up in the US create jobs. The law doesn't say what the minimum investment is. It says that it has to be substantial enough to cover operating costs for 1 full year. And that includes your office space, your warehouse space, salaries for at least 2 employees that you're going to hire. And then if you pay yourself a salary, that salary. So that's the baseline. I've never presented a case in these almost 20 years doing this for under $100,000, but it's a number that's accessible to many people. And all you have to show is that the funds are legally obtained. So you could even have your mom or dad, if you're 20 something, let's say, or someone in your family gift you those legalese. As long as you show that they're legally gifted to you, they're legally obtained, you can use those funds to fund the venture. So it's something that's definitely accessible to a lot of people.
So how does Uncle Sam view people that come over here? And it happens a lot, especially down here in the state of Florida. And they buy the picture framing store, the picture framing franchise, or the pool. They become a pool guy or a landscaping company, and they're using that as, if you like, as a vehicle to get in. Is that acceptable? Is it viewed upon okay?
Well, technically, the government is agnostic in terms of the kind of business, as long as you're not running drugs or illegal, human trafficking or something, obviously, right? If it's a legal business, I've seen hundreds of different kinds of businesses, from some of the ones you even mentioned, even ice cream shops and laundromats and things like that. And Uncle Sam's opinion was always, bring them in, bring your business, set it up, because they knew that it would create American jobs. What's happened in the past 3 years is that Uncle Sam's hair color has changed to a more orangish color. And those visas are actually getting denied a lot more than they used to be, even though they clearly create American jobs. So I would say that, coming up by the end of this year, we'll see where Uncle Sam sits, or where he really stands on this issue in terms of how welcome these business owners are. Right now, it's been a little dicey.
Right. What's the biggest mistake what's the biggest mistake my friends in the UK make when they originally start? What's the if you had only spoken to me a week ago, we could have stopped all of that.
I think it's cutting corners, and it's not just UK nationals. This is part of the human condition. People hear that it's easier if you do it a certain way, or you can cut a corner, like, for example, using a virtual office space, like getting just a virtual desk, when there's a requirement for what's called sufficient physical premises. And if you're projecting 2 employees plus you, at least for the first year, you need a 3-person office. It's clear cut. The law says it. You need to show that you're investing. And also the fear of putting money at risk without showing that your money is actually a risk, meaning that you're already spending it, you're not going to get the visa approved. So you have to take that leap of faith and not cut corners. And if you set up the business the right way, and if you have a 5-year business plan, the final adjudication, the final decision is really made based on the probability of success of the business. And that's measured by whether it's going to create and maintain jobs. So if you have a solid business model, then it should go well, but you have to make sure that you properly fund it, and that you get that office space or whatever's required, and you dot your I's and you cross your T's.
Okay. What about people that are considering buying a franchise as their business?
That's a great question. Franchises are very popular, especially in Florida. I've worked with companies based all over South Florida, on the West and East Coast, and it's a great model because, number one, they have an established track record. Number two, they give you the company backing, so they give you the training and all the backing you need, and the follow-ups, because they have a vested interest in expanding their brand, of course. And they also do it geographically. If they're doing it well, they're going to tell these potential investors, we're carving out this 50-mile radius for you only. I was just in Southwest Florida, and there was a chain of hairdressing places that I went to one, and I looked it up. I heard it was good, and there were 11 within 12 miles of me. Right. And I thought, this is really not good planning in terms of expansion, because each individual store owner will suffer. And so you want to look for a franchise that's really thinking about you and giving you a small monopoly in terms of geographic space, so you can really maximize that market. But I think the franchise model works really well compared to launching your own business that's not an extension of an existing business overseas. That's the caveat here. If you have a successful business overseas and you're setting up a subsidiary, you can use that business, and then you have a track record to build on. So I think that if you're starting from scratch, sometimes a franchise is a better option.
Okay. So now, Steve, we've decided, we've made the commitment, we're going to do this, right? What's the process? What have I got to do?
Well, basic preliminary steps is incorporate, get a tax ID number, set up a U.S. bank account. As you know, sometimes that can be tricky. You have to work with a bank that's flexible enough. If you're not able to come into the United States physically to open the bank account, especially now with COVID, and we don't know how long this will last, You need to work with a bank that's willing to do an identification verification overseas or some way electronically in order for you to open your bank account, because if without the bank account, you can't properly fund the business. So once you've taken those steps, then you fund the business, and that's based on the calculated substantial costs for the first year, right? Operating costs for the first year that are projected. You need to match or exceed that number in terms of the money in the account. And then the last step is getting that office space to show sufficient physical premises. Once you've done that and you're starting to spend the money and you have your first bank statement, then you're eligible. Really, that's the time to apply for your visa.
And what's that process? What do I have to do? Do I just go to a local government office, pick up a form, fill it in, and hand it over the counter? I mean, what do I have to do now? Because this is, I've done all of that. I've done like the business stuff, and I'm kind of used to that, right? I know how that works because I did it back here, right? Same principle, right? But now, but in essence, it is. But what I'm trying to get at is what I'm getting at is now I'm looking at, do I call the removal guy now? Do I start packing my bags now? I mean, how do I engage with Uncle Sam? What's the process to say, Uncle Sam, I want to come live here. Come let me do it. And I want to set up business. Here's all my stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
What do I do now?
So that depends on your nationality. If you have a passport from one of those 81 countries, including the UK, for example, then you can apply directly at a U.S. embassy or consulate that handles those E2 visa petitions. So in, let's say UK, for example, you would submit electronically your entire petition. And obviously you need to be developing this and preparing it while you're doing all the setup. So as soon as you're ready, you can submit the application. But you put that together and you submit it to what's called the E2 visa treaty unit at the U.S. Embassy in London. If you're not from one of those countries, then you have to apply for a different kind of visa. And that would only work really if you have an existing foreign business, meaning you have a foreign business that's set up for at least 1 year that you worked for. Then you set up the U.S. subsidiary, and then you have to apply with Immigration Service in the U.S. When you get approved, you get what's called an L1 visa. And then you're transferred between the companies and you go and apply for your visa at your corresponding U.S. embassy or consulate. So as I said in the beginning, it really depends on your nationality. The advantages of E2 are innumerable. There's so many of them. One of them is that depending on where you're from, you can get a 5-year visa right off the bat, which lets you grow your company organically. If you're doing an L1 because you're from China, Brazil, one of the BRICS countries, for example, none of them have E2 treaties, then you're forced to build out your company very quickly because you have to do it in 1 year and then go for renewal. And if you don't have those jobs in place and you're not generating revenue, you may not get an approval for an extension. So E2 is always the way to go if you're from one. And you can just look up on U.S. Department of State, type in the list for E2, and you'll see if your country, or let's say if you have a passport, I have clients from Brazil that set up in Florida, but they have an Italian passport or UK or French. They can use those passports at the U.S. consulate in Sao Paulo to apply directly for the visa. So it depends on where you're from.
Right. Now, you mentioned this, you use the term petition. What's in this? I mean, it's not, I don't stand on the corner and get everybody to sign, yeah, we want Carl to come and live in America, right? It's not that kind of petition. What does it mean? What's in it?
I think petition is a fancy word for application, right?
Okay.
But what it means is that if you're a startup, then you're presenting very basic proof that you're meeting all these legal tests that we talked about, plus the proof of funding, the source of the funds, and then the most important document is that 5-year prospective business plan with all the charts and the projections for job creation, for revenue, and for costs. And because they have to take your word for it that this will create it. And then obviously you need to go to that interview if you're going to U.S. Embassy or consulate and convince them that you really know what you're doing. So you have to be ready. You can't just improvise this. You have to do it the right way. So, but if you're an existing company that's setting up a subsidiary, then you want to back it up with all the proof of revenue, what the platform is, how many people are employed, what the hierarchy of the employees is. Right. And if it's a franchise, you jump on the back of the franchise and you provide all those franchise materials that show that it's a good business that's ready to grow.
Right. So what happens at the end of my 5 years when it comes to renewal, and maybe Uncle Sam says we don't want to renew it? What happens?
Well,
what choices do I have?
Well, I'm happy to say that in my almost 20 years that has not happened. And that's sometimes people do close their businesses. They get tired. They want to retire. They want to shift to some other lifestyle. Maybe they apply for a green card a different way and they give up the business. But generally, as long as you've created jobs, then the argument shifts from the creation of jobs to the maintenance of jobs. You can essentially argue if Joe Public doesn't get this extension for 5 more years, or in some cases, based on the country, 2 years, let's say, because there's something called reciprocity, which is where the US government plays favorites and gives preferential treatment to some countries and not to others.
Right.
But either way, if the jobs are in place, then your argument only is we need this person to stay, or the business will be closed because your visa status is tied to your business. And so it's in your best interest to make sure that you are creating and maintaining the job. So let's hope that that doesn't happen. But I guess in case it would, you would have to start from scratch essentially and reprioritize and say, how else could I be in the US legally and achieve whatever my dream might be?
Right. Okay. All right. I want to switch tacks now. I want to switch tack a little bit. So now I'm an employer in the United States. I'm a good, solid, single shingle warrior, building my business, mom and pop. I've got, 10 vans on the road, whatever, right? I'm doing my bit. I'm paying all my taxes and all this sort of stuff. I have a very high labor force. And because I'm a landscaping company, I attract a lot of potential interest to work for me from people from overseas. What are we know it's a minefield. What are the things that I need to do to ensure that all the people that I'm employing and giving work to, because that was a part of my deal for getting in, right? But they are all legitimate people that can work for me.
Well, I think that what the US government wants is American job creation, right? So there's two ways here. If you need to bring in a foreign national that really is indispensable, most likely that person will be back office, professional level, university degree holding, and you have to go through one of those channels like an H-1B visa or a TN if they're Canadian or Mexican. If there are people that are in the United States, what your duty is really, and this is more Department of Labor than immigration, is to pass them through the E-Verify system, to give them an I-9 and fill it out and see if they are actually authorized to work. You mentioned landscaping. Obviously, that's one of those industries where there are a lot of people who are working who are probably not authorized to work, and they're not on the books. And I'm sure you've had entire shows about that. That's a whole other topic. But if you talk to business owners, and you know this because you talk to many entrepreneurs, off the record, they would say, if it weren't for some of these individuals, especially in the restaurant and hotel industry, we may not be making our margins if we didn't have X amount of employees that we were paying off the books.
Right.
And so unfortunately, that's part of the backbone of some of our industries. And my job as an immigration attorney is only to make sure that my clients are passing people through the system. Once you pass someone through the system, because you might get a social security card even, or an employment authorization document that might be expired, or might be somebody else's, or you've maybe heard of social security numbers that are legitimate, but they're from people who are deceased. People use these to get on payroll, but now that there's a mandated system in place that's federal through Department of Labor, you're required to pass them through the system. And if they don't clear through the system, your responsibility is to get them off your payroll or to not hire them. And that's a very difficult decision for employers to make. I take them to that point and I tell them what the repercussions might be if they don't. If they're found to do it systematically, they can be fined $100,000 or more by Department of Labor. So it's really, you have to weigh the costs and the benefits, or the potential costs.
Right. So I often hear, and in fact, literally this week, I heard from somebody saying that we have an unlevel playing field. His competition are employing undocumented labor, and therefore his costs are negligible. So when it comes to quoting for the work, he can give quotes that the legitimate employer just couldn't get anywhere near. So it is a big problem. But you say that potentially the downside risk is fines of up to $100,000.
Yeah, the fines can be very big, especially for bigger companies that are shown to do it systematically.
Right.
It's so difficult to decide morally what to do when the bottom line is your responsibility. That's what a lot of people, there's a lot of controversy about our current president, and what a lot of people say who are business owners is we're very grateful that our taxes have been reduced, because that allows you to put money into research and development, or to hire more people legitimately,
Right.
or maybe to hire people who are legal as opposed to who are undocumented. So
Right.
it's a very gray area here. It's very difficult to say.
Right.
I would say I would never advocate for people doing things illegally.
Right.
My job is to get here, people here legitimately through the channels that we have. And this whole discussion has been turned upside down in the past 6 months because of furloughs. A lot of employers really work hard to get foreign employees that are indispensable, that they really need, that help them grow their businesses, especially these companies that are launching subsidiaries here, like from the UK, for example. They're bringing over one of their most important people to implement a business plan that will create X number of jobs for Americans. If they're not allowed to come now because there's an executive order that doesn't allow them to come until the end of the year, that's putting businesses on pause, or that's causing a lot of businesses to close,
Right.
which costs American jobs. So there's a balancing here that's not happening in terms of the administration too.
Right. Right. And I've always believed, and still do, that the vast majority of business owners and entrepreneurs all want to do the right thing and are legal, abiding, and upright. It's like everything else in this world. It's the small few that spoil it for everybody, whether it be on the employer side or the guy looking for work side, the employee side. It's always that small minority that ruin it for everybody, right?
Yeah, I think that's the history of the world. There's always the scapegoat. It's always, to me, that I always say the 0.1% that are the ones that aren't exemplary, just like the 0.1% of Americans who are in our U.S. prison system that maybe we don't hold up to, aren't holding up those standards that the rest that we want our children to hold up. It's the same, but they're used as a scapegoat. They're used as sort of the poster child for this is the immigrant, or this is the employer that's not doing things the way that they should. And there's the issue, of course, the economic issue is if everyone had to be legal, let's say we passed an amnesty and everyone became legal, in New York City, you'd have to pay everyone $15 an hour. Would the consumer be able to afford that, the cost that would be passed to them, right? That's the other issue, the economic side of it.
Right, right. I don't think this question's ever going to go away. I don't think this problem is ever going to go away. Steve, great help. I want to change tack yet again.
Sure.
As always, we always dedicate the last part of the show to finding a little bit more about our guest and also having a little bit of fun. So I've got my famous 35 in front of me, my quick fire 35 questions. I will pick them totally at randomly, and we'll see where it takes us. And if you don't have an answer, just say pass or move on, and we'll go with another one. You ready?
Okay, sounds good. Yep.
All right,
ready.
man. Best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
Don't jump in too fast. Make sure you take measured steps and you plan well, so when you hit the ground running, you're ready to go and you're going to be successful. Biggest
misstep or mistake you've made in business?
I don't think that I've ever made mistakes. I think it's all a learning process. I mean, they're mistakes, but you learn from them. There's nothing that's changed my life completely. I've taken lots of risks, changed countries, set up my own firm twice, and you just learn. Every day is a learning process.
Okay. When that little guy sits on your shoulder and goes, Steve, you don't want to be doing that. Steve, don't go down that road. We all have those moments of self-doubt and the imposter syndrome. How does Steve deal with it? How do you deal with that?
I always say, how would I look at myself in the morning the next day if I went down that road? And I have potential clients that are saying, hey, I was told I could do it this way or do it that way. And I'll say to them, look, I can't take your case. I can't do it this way. This is what the law says. We have to do it as creatively and strongly as possible in terms of our arguments and how we set things up. But we can't go down this path because that's not kosher. That's not legal. That's gray area. And I'm not going to go there. So,
which words or phrases does Steve most overuse?
I've been told I say the word essentially a lot. But I think it's really pet peeves of what other words that people use that drive me crazy, that teach me to not use them myself, like the word like, saying like all the time, or practically, or no, there's another one.
That's
yeah, all those fillers. And here in New York, when I was growing up, they used to say, you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying. And obviously, if you know what they're saying, you don't have to repeat that over and over. So,
what book has had the biggest impact on you? What business book has had the biggest impact on you?
Oh, business book. Really, honestly, I don't read business books. I was a history major and a journalism major, so I read a lot of history books, and I try to see how we repeat patterns and how that really spans all the cultures of making the same mistakes over and over. So I like to read about what other people have done. The most inspirational book to me is The Slave Narrative of Frederick Douglass. He's my hero. So I read that every time I think I'm in a bad way or things aren't going well. I just pick up that book and read a few chapters.
Does Steve like to be in control or in charge?
Probably in charge. I like a team. I like to be in charge, but running a team. So control is not important to me. I just want things to go well, you know.
So if you weren't a lawyer, what other talent would you most like to have? What other career would you most like to try?
I would have been a singer. In fact, my mom was an artist. She was a painter, and she was disappointed that I went into journalism and then I went into law. She would have been much happier if I had stuck with singing. I actually sang in Carnegie Hall in a choir when I was a child, and sang in the Florida Philharmonic as an adult, and now I'm in this pop rock group, and I think that probably would have been my thing. I just realized from having two broke artistic parents that maybe that wasn't the best way or the easiest way to go.
But when you want to get yourself hyped and really pumped up and motivated, what's the song that Steve listens to? What's the tune that you listen
to? Any metal song from the 80s. I'm a huge metalhead. I fell in love with metal when I heard Rocky Like a Hurricane, Scorpions. That was 1983. So I was 9 years old, and that's been my thing ever since. That's what I run to. That's what I work out to. That would definitely be it.
Okay. Living person you most admire?
I would say, can I choose a few? Just one. I would say the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama for sure. My parents were both Buddhists, and I had a chance to meet him once when I was living in Argentina, and he's suffered for so long, you know, being expelled from China in 1959 until now, and he's held that mantle and that torch he's carried it for so many millions of people that I think it's definitely him.
Your greatest extravagance? I can see you like art.
I thought you might ask this one. I was wondering how I would answer it. I think my love for music has taken me to an extreme. I've probably been to about 400 concerts over the years, but I started traveling to the home country of the bands that I love most, or the artists I love most. So flying, you know, to Canada from Argentina to see Bryan Adams, for example, or when I was living in Argentina, flying to the US to see bands like Queensryche, which is probably my favorite group. So there's a whole different level of passion that you see among the multitude of people when they're so proud of their hometown artist. And so to see them in other countries where people really are a lot more vocal, as you know, than they are here in the States, because we're so used to seeing whoever we want, whenever we want. That's my biggest extravagance. I love traveling, but I love combining that with music as well.
What trait do you most deplore in others?
I think honesty. I've worked with lots of different people over the years, and obviously in my personal relationships as well. And I think the most important thing is no matter how much the truth hurts, or it might hurt, to be honest. And that's what I do with my clients or potential clients. So I tell them, this is exactly where you stand. And sometimes it hurts, but they're always grateful to know where they stand. So honesty, pure and simple.
All right. What's Steve's idea of misery?
Oh, misery to me is inequity, I think. When you travel around the world, you study history, you see so much inequity. And I think that there are people that are born into situations where they really have no opportunity. They will have almost no opportunity to get out of that. And to me, that's misery. And that's something that as human beings, I wish we wouldn't tolerate, but that to me is misery.
So let's go the other way. What's Steve's idea of heaven?
Heaven to me is a place, and I think we talked about the American dream to me, and it was very on point what you said. No matter how many barriers are put up by our government, there are so many people that would love to have this opportunity. So to me, heaven is a place where everyone has an opportunity to live out whatever their dream might be.
Right. So last one, if this program could connect you with any one person, prince, pauper, potentate, anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, if they were watching and you want them to turn to their assistant, friend, colleague, say, get me that Steve on the phone, I want to talk to him, who would it be?
I think this is probably an obvious answer, but it would be the President of the United States right now, because he's somebody who has married 2 foreign nationals. His mom was from Wales. He should understand what the immigrant dream is all about. And a lot of the policies that have been put into place recently are going a completely opposite direction. And so I would love to have a reality check with our president.
Mr. President, give him a call. You now have quite a long line of TEMA Talk guests that want to have a bit of a chat with you. So I think we've got a bit of a trend. We've got a bit of a trend coming here, Mr. President, even though I do say it myself. So give him a call and let's see what we can happen. So talking of which, if he wants to give you a call, or anybody wants to get in touch with you and say, Steve, look, I've this petition thing and these forms and these this and these that, I need somebody to hold my hand. How are they going to get a hold of Steve?
They can write me anytime. My email is smaggi@smalawyers.com. And I really am available to anyone, because there's so many things happening in this country right now, and so many people that are stranded in terms of their immigration status, or employers who don't know what to do, or people stuck outside the U.S., that I'm happy to be a resource to anyone who needs it.
Give us that address again, one more time.
smaggi@smalawyers.com.
You got it. Steve, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us today. And I know the information that you've shared has been very valuable with it, to all our viewers. That's it. Another 30 minutes of business banter and badinage has gone. Again, I want to thank Steve for sharing some of his time. I want to thank the team at Guerilla Media for twiddling their knobs and making all this happen. I have no idea what goes on. I just turn up and do this. I want to thank you for watching and for listening. And don't forget to visit TEMA's Video Vault of Wisdom at thirdeyemanagement.com, where we share all the other TEMA talks with you. And there's loads of episodes where we share strategies and tactics on how to grow your business. So until the next time, as always, I want you to stay safe. I want you to stay in touch, but most importantly, I want you to stay profitable. And with that, we are